welcome to week 2 of the Hive Pollinator. Today we're talking about designing for inclusion. Welcome! My name is Anya, and I'd like to share a couple of fun facts about me. I have a fancy degree, but I am so ADHD that I have absolutely no idea how it happened. I am a visual artist. I drew all of the things in the slideshow, but I have aphantasia, so I can't actually picture things in my head. All of the things that I draw, I'm seeing them for the first time kind of as I'm drawing them. So I have a weird brain. It's fun. I like it. On our agenda for today, we're going to start with an activity. I'm going to have you engaging in a form of inclusive design. We're actually going to be reverse designing, where rather than coming up with the object and making it usable, we are looking at an object and figuring out what makes it usable and who it's usable for. Then we're going to reflect on that, because reflecting on learning is really where the learning happens. You complete an activity, you acquire a bunch of information, and it's in the thinking about what you just did or what you just encountered, what information you just encountered, that's really where the magic happens. Then we're going to discuss different ways of thinking about disability, different models that exist out in the world. And then I'll introduce you to some web accessibility principles that will be helpful for when you are creating any online content. And then I will invite you to apply what you learned, discovered, thought to your business. Okay, so let's get started with the activity. First, we're going to go over what the activity is. I'm going to give you an example and then we'll get to it. Okay. So the goal of this activity, as I mentioned, is you're going to be reverse designing an object. So picking an object that has a use. It needs to be something that you can use in order to do something else. So not a decorative object or a like structural object. It needs to be something that you could use for something. You're going to think about what it takes in order to use that object, in order to be able to use that object. So rather than focusing on the specific properties of the object itself, you're thinking about the person who is using the object. Person may or may not be human. I have a very expansive view of person, but you're thinking about someone who wants to use the object, what needs to be true about them in order for them to be able to do so. So I'm going to ask you to list all of the assumptions that must be true for someone to be able to use that object, and then leave a couple blank spaces between each assumption. So the goal of this is to get you thinking about all the different assumptions that are built into the objects that are all around us. We don't necessarily think about things this way up until the point when we are no longer able to use the object. So you might not think about door handles up to the point where your hands are full and you are temporarily unable to use your hands in order to operate a door. And now you're thinking about, okay, how could I use this without hands, right? So we don't usually think about the world in this way, but I am inviting you to do so today, because that is going to be directly relevant to the overall conversation of designing for inclusion. Okay, so I'm going to start you off with an example, talk through it, and then if you have any clarifying questions, and we're doing this asynchronously, you can contact me online, but hopefully the contents will be clarifying enough. I don't know. It's tricky to do things when it's not in real time and you're not having a exchange, but bear with me. Okay, so I don't have any interesting objects on me. So let's just imagine this. And by imagine, I mean, look, I drew it for you. Imagine this pair of pink headphones that has little ears on it. So you know that they are headphones because they have a tail. Headphones are one of those objects that actually require another object in order to work. So the headphones don't produce a sound, but they will create the sound out of whatever information they're being fed from their input, and ideally put it at your ears in a sound wave form. So in order to use these headphones, which are used for receiving sounds from other machines, the object user must have a head around which the object will fit. So a pretty good first assumption or starting point is the assumption that the user must be human. Human beings mostly design things for other humans. We also sometimes design things for other species for them to be able to use, and not specifically for humans. So a human is not going to get the same use out of a birdhouse as a bird is going to get. But the idea is that you have an object, it's designed for someone, right? And it imparts the values related to that someone into the object. So these are probably not going to be very useful for most species, definitely not for species that don't have ears or particularly large rounded heads. So assumption one, have to have a head around which the headphones will fit. Assumption two, in order to get the functionality of headphones, which is transmitting sound into ears, you need to be able to convert that sound into something that you can use in your brain. So if you don't have a way to convert sound waves into brain waves, the headphones are not going to be particularly useful for you. A lot of hearing loss and hearing issues actually come from that conversion mechanism rather than the physical components. Physical component just kind of provides a tunnel for the information to go. It's that conversion, it's that cochlea, right? That takes the sound waves and then lets the brain know where they fall on a spectrum of sounds. So if that doesn't work, headphones are not going to be particularly useful to you. Okay, so started with a couple assumptions. I just throw out a few more. You need to be able to grasp the object, have some way of putting it on, taking it off, right? You need to be able to observe where the object is in space. So either be able to visually track it or feel around for it. If the object is somewhere where you can't see it and maybe you're unable to see, maybe there's a way that you can get it to make sound so that you can find it that way. But nope, not with these guys. These guys you need to be able to see or feel. So assumptions, lots of assumptions. For your assumptions, after each assumption, this is why I initially asked to leave blank spaces after assumptions. After each assumption, I want you to answer the following questions. 1, what happens to the usability of the object if the assumption is not met? Is it still going to be usable? Is it going to be usable in a lesser degree? Is it going to be challenging to use? Is it going to be painful to use? What happens? 2, how could this object be adapted to still be usable if the assumption is not met? And this is where the design portion comes in. So now you are redesigning some aspect of the object so that if the assumption about, say, head size and shape or ability to convert information into brain usable information, those are not true, you could still use the object or get something out of it. So how will you redesign some aspect of the object so that it's still usable, even if the assumption that you listed is no longer true? And here's what that might look like. We're calling these adaptations. Okay, so assumption 1, object user must have a head around which the headphones will fit. If that assumption is not true, the headphones will not fit, so the sound will not be transmitted directly to the ears, so sound might still come in, but it might be garbled or muffled. Not a great experience. An adaptation that you could build into the object so that it accommodates more shapes and sizes of head, you can make the headphones adjustable to fit different head sizes and shapes, and most headphones are to an extent. Assumption number 2, object user must be able to convert sound waves into a format compatible with their brain. If they are unable to do so, then the sounds made by the headphones will not be perceived as sounds. It will just not be perceived. Uh, an adaptation, which is a little tricky with a pair of headphones. Like, you bought these headphones, here's some brain surgery. Is to weld a chip onto the user's brain that can convert sounds into brain data. This does not seem specifically feasible, but it's actually a really big deal in the adaptive and assistive technology realm to try to convert either sound or visual information into a different format that could still be interpreted by the brain. So you could bypass the part of your system that converts information from what it is outside to what your brain could understand, and you can convert that information and deliver it to the brain, hopefully in a way that it can interpret. And people have been figuring that out for sight and sound and proprioception when you're in space. Really neat stuff, but very unlikely that someone is going to sell brain surgery with headphones. So it is unlikely that headphones will be usable for people who cannot hear. Okay, now it's your turn. So I invite you to spend the next 15 minutes. I'm actually not going to spend 15 minutes on this recording, so I would recommend that you pause it and give yourself some time to do the activity. And then the next 10 minutes after that is going to be sharing out the activity and seeing if people can guess what the object is based on the assumptions that need to be true in order to use it. So you can do this. I very much invite you to engage with the activity. You don't have to then guess what the object is, but you're welcome to do it if there's someone who you don't mind bothering with that. So the activity, you make a list of every assumption you can think of, especially silly or obvious ones, like species, physiology, physiognomy, whatever. Think of the following types of assumptions. Structural, related to physical features. So do you need to have hands? Do you need to have fingers, thumbs, digits? Do they need to be opposable? Do you need to have ears? What do you actually need to have? Functional, related to physical capabilities. Okay, so you have these things. What are you supposed to be able to do with them? So do you need fine motor skills? Do you need to be able to grasp? Do you need to be able to lift? Do you need to be able to move around in certain ways? Cognitive assumptions related to mental capabilities. Do you need to be able to pay attention, to hold things in working memory, language? Like, what do you need? And then contextual, related to your ecosystem. Are there certain contexts in which you are more or less able to use this object? So think about like social contexts, like sort of appropriate use paradigms, just any sort of assumptions with like things like these. I'd say if you are wearing these in like a professional setting, the assumption is that you have permission to wear these in a professional setting. I don't know. Like, there's just go wild. Okay, so once you have your assumptions for each one of them, I want you to think about what happens to the usability of the object if the assumption is not met, and how can the object be adapted to still be usable if the assumption is not met. I'm gonna edit this out. It'll be fun. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Okay. So once we've completed the activity, we could share it out and then maybe get more suggestions for adaptations that will make the object usable. The idea is that you working by yourself don't have nearly as many experiences of trying to use things as a whole bunch of other people who have different bodies and different ways of experiencing the world. So if you throw it out to more people, you get more ideas for how to adapt things and how to, and what sort of assumptions even go into using them. Okay. So the learning portion comes in this reflection period. So reflecting upon the list that you just made, did you consider mobility? So things such as tremors, handshakes, right? Motor skills, fine motor skills, being able to move in small increments versus gross motor skills, paralysis, injury, so temporary or permanent sort of mobility issues. What about cognition? What sort of perceptual abilities? Can someone use it if they're colorblind? Can someone use it if they are unable to detect motion? All sorts of perceptual things occur, and like you don't necessarily think about them until if they go wrong, but there are people who can see perfectly well but cannot track motion. Do you need to be able to pay attention? Do you need to remember things or be able to remember things? Executive function, language ability. Are there any components that you didn't consider? Now, whose experience did you consider when you're making the list of assumptions? So the easiest person is definitely yourself, but maybe you have a relative or someone who you know who also has the same object and has a different experience with using it. Maybe the font size is too small and they can see, but they can't quite see when the font size is that small. Or maybe the buttons are not the right size or shape, and maybe they don't have the manual dexterity in order to use them. So, who all did you consider when making this list of assumptions? And what other factors might influence the usability of something? Now we're getting a little bit more expansive. So it's not just specifically about the object, but think about any product, service, or experience and what factors might influence someone's ability to use something. So think about how many spaces someone could access when they are with small children. How many spaces someone can access when they are very young, or what someone's experience might be if they walk into a business and the business proprietor makes assumptions about them based on the color of their skin. There's all sorts of factors that also go into the usability of something. I think with autonomous systems, especially things like skin tone actually are very influential factors. If you think about automatic faucets and the way that they are designed to detect skin tones within a certain range, which means that they do not detect skin tones outside of that range. Like a lot of factors go into usability, and I would invite you to think about them. And lastly, think about why it might be challenging to think of assumptions. So I did ask you to do kind of this unnatural thing, like you're not moving around the world thinking about all the different things that you need to be able to do in order to use the objects that you use. You just use them. Why might it be challenging to think about assumptions? Okay. So I invite you to spend 10 minutes doing that. And I'm just gonna move forward. Doo-doo. Okay. So we've done the activity. We've reflected on the activity. Yay, magic. Now we're going to go into models of disability, which actually directly relate to that reflection, and then we'll move forward from there. Okay. So there are 5 different models of disability. 5 different models. 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 5 different models different ways of thinking about disability. I'm just going to go over the most visible, most prominent ones. The one that I think are, at least my experience living in the United States, the one that I've interacted with most frequently is called the medical model. And it is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It sort of assumes maybe a normal or an idealized physiological state. Uh, there's a lot of really interesting things that go into defining normal, including who is and is not included in what normal looks like. But there is ideas of what is normal for physiology, physiognomy, for different aspects of human functioning. And you are compared to that normal, and anything that is different between you and the norm is considered to be a disability or a dysfunction or something that is wrong with you. So the medical model very much asks you, what is wrong with you? You specifically, you differ from other human beings in some particular way, and we're going to frame that as a deficit, and then we're going to treat it as such. So it's the model that looks at things like ADHD and autism, treats them as disorders, and assumes that there's something wrong with the person who has that sort of brain, and looks for ways to fix them or integrate them into society in a way that makes other people comfortable. So that's the medical model of disability. It also includes pregnancy. Pregnancy is a disability. It is a pathology. You are considered a patient. It's sort of like you're sick. So a pregnant person might have their rights taken away because the doctor knows better than they do. So medical model covers a whole lot of things, but it does compare people to a norm and then asks what's wrong with it. The social model takes into account the fact that most of our surroundings, most of what we interact with on a regular basis, are things that are designed by humans. We have designed the heck out of this world, and we've designed a lot of ways in which we can interact with it. A lot of things that we interact with on a daily basis exist because humans have designed them, humans have created them. So rather than asking what is wrong with you, the individual who does not match up to this idealized version of human, it's asking what is it about this product or service or experience that is excluding you, that is creating a barrier for you to be able to experience it. So it's looking at all the different ways in which people are left out of design. And rather than kind of pinning it all in one person, in one place, like you individually, there's something wrong, it's asking systemically, what can we do to be more inclusive? So what right now is making this exclusionary? Like, why are you unable to access this good or service? And I think it's a more helpful way of looking at the world, because it's not nearly as, like, you're not individualizing a problem. And if you are not individualizing it, you are much more likely to fix it. So you're much more likely to design in an inclusive way if you are not also blaming or pitying or just kind of discarding people because they are disabled. You've not medicalized them and been like, oh no, woe is me. You exist in the world. How sad for you. It's more like, oh, well, this clearly is not designed to work with you. How do we work around that? How do we adapt it? How do we change it? Or how do we design things so that they do work for you? So those are different ways of looking at disability. And my invitation is to lean a little less on the medical model because that does not feel good. And it does have its place. Like, clearly there are things that are impairments. There are things that like need to be addressed. But for a lot of things, like you're not gonna fix someone. You're just gonna make them feel uncomfortable. And then if you have them go through the process of getting a diagnosis in order to get an accommodation, it's only gonna make them feel more alien and you're putting more work on them. People are pretty good at accommodating themselves. In fact, if you are interested in how to make things more accessible for more people, people who have lifetime of experience making things more accessible for themselves will probably be a good source of information for that. Um, so okay, we're gonna move on. So we talked about different ways of thinking about disability. Now we're going to talk about ways of making things more accessible when you are creating things online. So web accessibility applies to your website. It is a analog of your physical space. So the way that your physical space needs to be set up has to be ADA compliant. You need to be able to get into the building with a wheelchair or other mobility assisting technologies. Signage needs to have Braille, and it needs to be like if you have bathrooms, you need to be able to use the bathroom, regardless of mobility issues. So there might be like rails so that you can get in a wheelchair, plenty of space, just lots of things that you need to do physically in order to make spaces accessible for people. Same for online spaces. There is a legal obligation if you are offering a public service, but generally it is good practice. And it might also be, I don't know if anyone could sue you for not having an accessible website, but it's just better to do it so that you aren't excluding people even incidentally. So if you follow these principles, you're much more likely to make your website accessible and include as many people as possible. So I'm going to introduce you to the POUR principles, in part using these little creatures. I love creatures. So POUR stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And we're going to start with perceivable. So in order for something to be perceivable, someone must be able to receive that information using one of their senses that they are actually able to use. So if you have information only available to one sense, someone who does not have that one sense, either they have a permanent inability to employ that sense or temporarily or situationally, but if that one sense is out, they're not going to be able to perceive it. So you need to make sure that your information is perceivable to multiple senses, so at least one will be able to detect it. So let's say that you're this beautiful, fancy eyeball chicken. You have no way of hearing, so no auditory information goes in, and you're fairly limited in your tactile sensations. So what you're looking for is you need visual information. If any auditory information is present, it needs to also be visually displayed. That's what closed captioning is for in videos, and that is what text descriptions of any audio that you might have, like if you record a sound or have some dialogue playing, like you need to describe it so that people who are hearing impaired are able to perceive it. If someone has limited visual ability, so visual impairment, maybe limited tactile, good alternative is audio. And an audio alternative, if you are low vision, no vision, it helps to have alternative text. The alt text is not for the human, it is for the machine to then reproduce for the human in their preferred manner. So in this case, presumably this being would be using a screen reader. So the screen reader navigates to your website and it needs to know what information to give to the person. So if there's an image there, giving the image alternative text to describe maybe this is a decorative image, so you could skip over it, or this is an image containing information, here's the information that it contains, that's going to be very helpful. If they are limited vision but not no vision, just giving them the option to have larger text. So sometimes you'll see like accessibility features on website that allow you to blow up the text. A lot of computers actually have that functionality built in as well. So you could give large text options so that people with limited vision might still be able to see what you are trying to deliver. And then if you have video, giving audio descriptions of the video. And so some, like, if you watch Netflix, there are some shows where you can request audio descriptions of the video and it will say like what is happening in the scene. And then the dialogue will be as usual. Lastly, let's say someone has no visual and limited or no audio, and they need tactile. They need to be able to feel things. That's their dominant way of interacting with the world. Giving them alternative text, and this is where like alt text and tags on all the content. So making sure that your headings are properly tagged and all of your images and buttons are also tagged so that a machine that is reading the website can then convert that information into a format that is compatible with the person who's using it. So they might need an alt text that works with a Braille reader and just making sure that there's some compatibility there. I think for the most part, if you're using website builders, that is on their end. So like it is on Squarespace or Wix or whoever you're using to make their things compatible with assistive technologies. My assumption is that they do that, but I'm not sure. Okay. So moving on from perceivable, they can perceive it. They also need to be able to use it. So if you put buttons on your site, don't make them teeny tiny and really hard to get to. If you need really fine motor skills in order to click a button, that button is too hard to click. So in order to make any interactive elements usable, they need to be large enough for someone to press them, for someone to navigate to them. And then it's also helpful when you have buttons to let people know what will happen if the button is clicked. That's more of like a psychological thing. It's just nice to know, like, yeah, this is what happens when I click this button. Also give people enough time to do things. So if you're gonna have a timer for a form, give plenty of opportunity, just plenty of time for people to finish things. Don't assume that everyone is going to do things as quickly as you might. Understandable. I think this one is uh, very tricky and it's something that everyone can do. Here is a sentence that I had a AI generate. I was looking for a lot of jargon and acronyms. To me, this is virtually unreadable. Like it looks like sort of vaguely familiar words, but a lot of them are just like referential to other things that you need to know in order to understand. So I would not use a sentence like this, except if it's really deep into a site where like the purpose of the site is to teach you UX UI jargon, tech industry jargon. Maybe that will belong there. But if you're just kind of introducing ideas to people, if you're explaining your product, if you're explaining your services, minimize the jargon. Don't use acronyms. And if you do, like explain them. But make it as easy to understand what you were saying as possible. assume I think a sixth grade reading level is usually a good spot to aim for. And that usually helps with some cognitive impairments as well. Just simple language, make it obvious. So an understandable version of that nonsense is we create easy to use designs that work well on any device. We test those designs to make sure that make sure they help your company reach its goals. That's understandable. At least none of the words are incomprehensible or weird. No one's gonna feel weird or silly reading that. Okay. So the last thing is that whatever you create needs to be robust. Um, so it needs to scale. So someone could read it on a small screen just as well as they read it on a large screen. That's actually called adaptive or reactive design, where it reacts to the size of the screen and makes itself appropriately sized. Also needs to be compatible with assistive devices such as braille readers and screen readers. Okay, so we've gone through the core principles. Now we apply things. So consider what we've covered today, the activity, the different models of disability, and the core principles, and then plan out how you will incorporate inclusive design into your business. So consider your offerings. What assumptions are built into products, services, or experiences that you're building that your business is offering? Who can you learn from to make the offerings more inclusive? Now consider your community. Who all might need what your business is offering? And who might be excluded unless you specifically include them? Yay! That's up. Thank you. Feedback, please.